Hello guys, good day. This is your Sir Erwin Bourbon and this is your alternative learning material in creative writing. Our discussion is all about writing poetry, and in this lesson, we will know what a poetry is and its characteristics. First of all, let's watch this video explaining and discussing what a poetry is.
Muhammad Ali spent years training to become the greatest boxer the world had ever seen, but only moments to create the shortest poem. Ali captivated Harvard's graduating class in 1975 with his message of unity and friendship. When he finished, the audience wanted more. They wanted a poem. Ali delivered what is considered the shortest poem ever. Me, we. Or is it me, we? No one's really sure. Regardless, if these two words are a poem, then what exactly makes a poem a poem? Poets themselves have struggled with this question, often using metaphors to approximate a definition. Is a poem a little machine, a firework, an echo, a dream? Poetry generally has certain recognizable characteristics. 1. Poems emphasize language's musical qualities. This can be achieved through rhyme, rhythm, and meter, from the sonnets of Shakespeare to the odes of Confucius to the Sanskrit Vedas. 2. Poems use condensed language, like literature with all the water wrung out of it. 3. Poems often feature intense feelings, from Rumi's spiritual poetry to Pablo Neruda's Ode to an Onion. Poetry, like art itself, has a way of challenging simple definitions. While the rhythmic patterns of the earliest poems were a way to remember stories even before the advent of writing, a poem doesn't need to be lyrical. Rainer Doll's Apfel and Eugen Gomringer's Silencio toe the line between visual art and poetry. Meanwhile, E. Cummings wrote poems whose shapes were as important as the words themselves, in this case, amplifying the sad loneliness of a single leaf falling through space. If the visual nature of poetry faded into the background, perhaps we'd be left with music. And that's an area that people love to debate. Are songs poems? Many don't regard songwriters as poets in a literary sense, but lyrics from artists like Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, and Tupac Shakur often hold up even without the music. In rap, poetic elements like rhyme, rhythm, and imagery are inseparable from the form. Take this lyric from the Notorious B.I.G. I can hear sweat trickling down your cheek, your heartbeats sound like Sasquatch feet, thundering, shaking the concrete. So far, all the examples we've seen have had line breaks. We can even imagine the two words of Ali's poem organizing in the air, me, we. Poetry has a shape that we can usually recognize. Its line breaks help readers navigate the rhythms of a poem. But what if those line breaks disappeared? Would it lose its essence as a poem? Maybe not. Enter the prose poem. Prose poems use vivid images and wordplay, but are formatted like paragraphs. When we look at poetry less as a form and more as a concept, we can see the poetic all around us. Spiritual hymns, the speeches of orators like Martin Luther King Jr., JFK, and Winston Churchill, and surprising places like social media. In 2010, journalist Joanna Smith tweeted updates from the earthquake in Haiti. Was in B-room getting dressed when heard my name, tremor, ran outside through sliding door. All still now, safe, roosters crowing. Smith uses language in a way that is powerful, direct, and filled with vivid images. Compare her language to a haiku, the ancient Japanese poetic form that emphasizes bursts of brief intensity, with just 3 lines of 5, 7, and 5 syllables. The waters of poetry run wide and deep. Poetry has evolved over time, and perhaps now more than ever, the line between poetry, prose, song, and visual art has blurred. However, one thing has not changed. The word poetry actually began in verb form, coming from the ancient Greek poiesis, which means to create. Poets, like craftsmen, still work with the raw materials of the world to forge new understandings and comment on what it is to be human in a way only humans can. Dartmouth researchers tested this idea by asking robots to pen poetry. A panel of judges sorted through stacks of sonnets to see if they could distinguish those made by man and machine. You may be happy to know that while scientists have successfully used artificial intelligence in manufacturing, medicine, and even journalism, poetry is a different story. The robots were caught red-handed 100% of the time.
According to the video that you have just watched, poetry came from the Greek word poesis, which means to make or create. Therefore, poetry, or its etymology, is a verb in form which connotes action, and that action is to make or to create. Muhammad Ali, a famous boxing sensation, has uttered the shortest considered poem, which is the Me, We, during a speech in the Harvard University in 1975. You see, poetry is not about length. Poetry is not about how long a piece is or how short it is. In short, we can create or we can write poetry using few words which have definite meaning and implication. Also, sometimes poetry does not need to be written. Sometimes it just comes out from our mouth. As you can see in the history of literature, specifically here in the Philippines, most of our literary pieces before the colonial period were mostly in oral form, meaning to say it is passed from one generation to another through oral communication, because sa tunga time wala pa kita systems of writing. But when the Spaniards came here in our country, we have developed our own system of writing. Hence, we were able to record every literary piece, may be prose or poetry, into written text. Always remember that poetry is not the same with prose. While poetry does not usually follow strict grammar, our prose is sometimes lengthy and most of the time it is technical. When we say prose, this is writings in paragraph form or essay form, whereas poetry naman niya is nakastanza, line by line. Now, these are the important elements in poetry that we need to consider when we are writing poems. We have the rhythm, the sound, the experience, imaginative or imagination, and emotions. Rhythm refers to the beat of the words within the line or within the stanza, using rhyme schemes and rhyming, whereas sound, on the other hand, these refer to the overall sound or the phonological effect of the poetry, may it be my rhyme scheme or wala. Later on, we will know what a rhyme scheme is and how we create a rhyme scheme using rhyming. Next, we have the experience. Experience, this is the story that we put in our poems. So these are sometimes relatable, sometimes fresh, sometimes new, sometimes odd or strange. And these experiences are conveyed to our readers through narrative poetry. Next, we have imagination. Imagination is very important in poetry because without this, you cannot be able to create a substantive and effective poetry. as what we have discussed, imagination is the brain of creative writing, and everything that we write are first developed and honed in our imagination. Next, another important element is the emotion. Our poetry should be relatable. It should appeal to the emotional senses of our readers by using appropriate and sometimes powerful words. So that's the important elements in writing poetry. Now we have the characteristics of a poem. So it should have a language musical quality. So it has rhyme, it should have rhythm and meter. When we say language's musical quality, this refers to the phonological effect or the overall sound of the poetry that we are writing or reading. And these languages' musical qualities are achieved through the effective use of rhyme, rhythm, and meter. Again, we have a separate discussion for rhyme, rhythm, and meter. So we will know what these are later on. Next, it should use a condensed language. When we say condensed language, we should always remember that poetry is not about length. Therefore, we should be economically concise when we are using words. Kumbaga, we need to choose words which are brief, words which are easy to understand, words which are appropriate, representing the experience, the emotion, or the story that we are trying to convey to our readers. Avoid using highfalutin words in writing poetry because that would create confusion among your readers, especially if they are not aware of the meaning of the words na ginagamit nimo. Always remember that in writing, we should always consider first our readers. Next characteristic is it should feature intense feelings. So what is this intense feeling? So this refers to the emotional aspect nga try natin convey sa aton nga readers. So intense feelings, it should be relatable. If the story is sad, dapat masad man imo nga reader. If the story is centered on happiness, dapat happy man imo reader. Therefore, you should be responsible using appropriate elements so that you will achieve these intense feeling. Now let's jump to the definition or meaning of poetry according to various poets. We have Wordsworth. According to him, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from the emotion recollected in tranquility. So, kay Williams Wordsworth nga pagka-intindi o pagka-define sa poetry is centralized on the feelings or emotion. Whereas ang kay T.S. Eliot, poetry is not a turning loose of emotion but an escape from emotion. It is not the expression of personality but an escape from personality. So as you can see, again kay William Wordsworth, centralized is the feeling or emotion. Una ang pagka-define niya sa poetry, whereas ang kay Eliot naman niya is both escape from the emotion and personality. Kumbaga, it's a detachment from these things so that you may find another meaning. According to Encyclopedia Americana, on the other hand, emotional and imaginative discourse in metrical form is the representation of experiences or ideas with a special reference to their emotional significance in language characterized by imagery and rhythmic sound. So take note, na-mention niya sa Encyclopedia Americana ang imagery. So imagery is very important or plays a very important role in poetry. Poetry is similar to painting and sculpture because of its use of imagery, symbolism, simile, metaphor, and other kinds of tropes, which creates in the reader's mind concrete objects and pictures. So always remember, guys, that poetry is a form of art. Alright? But not everyone who writes poetry are considered artists. It's because only few adhere to the basic and essential definition of poetry when they are writing. So everyone can write, but not everyone can become a good poet or artist. Poetry is also similar to music because of its use of rhythm and rhyme, metrical measures, alliteration, and assonance, and other typical rhetorical figures, which invokes in the reader's inner ear sound patterns that are oftentimes melodious, harmonious, but it is superior to music because of its ability to render both concrete and abstract ideas with some exactitude and precision. Take note, again, poetry is superior to poetry, or to music rather, or to a song, according to this description or definition. And poetry is almost the same with music because of its musical quality. Now let's know further kung ano ang difference ng poetry kag prose. There are 5 fundamental characteristics distinguishing poetry from prose. First is the using poetic line rather than the sentence, the primary unit of prose. So guys, kung ang prose naton sentence ang ginagamit niya, ang sa poetry naton on the other hand is line. Okay? Kung sa prose naton nagagamit kita paragraph, sa aton poetry nagagamit kita stanza. Second, relying more on images than abstractions. So poetry should rely more on the image, or it should create mental pictures so that our readers or their readers would relate to what is being narrated in the poetry. Cultivating the sound of words. So take note again, ang aton nga poetry has its musical quality, whereas ang prose natin, it's plain, but it's not definitely boring. Okay? It's just that poetry has this rhythm, rhyme, meter, etc., which the prose does not have. Next, developing rhythms of language. So as I've mentioned, rhythm is an important element of poetry, and this refers to the musical quality of the poetry. So next, creating density by implying far more than is stated. So that's your poetry, guys. Again, poetry came from the Greek word poesis, which means to create or to make. Okay? To further strengthen your knowledge about poetry, kindly watch this last video.
What is poetry? Believe it or not, most people struggle to answer this question. Most times individuals will give their interpretation as opposed to a solid definition. Even the major dictionaries differ greatly at times in defining what a poem is. If you haven't already, and without cheating, ask yourself, what is poetry? If you don't know, are unsure, or want to see if you're right, stick around. We're about to answer that. Here's what a few popular dictionaries have to say. Webster's Dictionary, metrical writing. Writing that formulates a concentrated, imaginative awareness of experience in language chosen and arranged to create a specific emotional response through meaning, sound, and rhythm. Oxford Dictionary, literary work in which special intensity is given to the expression of feelings and ideas by the use of distinctive style and rhythm. Macmillan Dictionary, a piece of writing using beautiful or unusual language arranged in fixed lines that have a particular beat and often rhyme. Cambridge Dictionary, a piece of writing in which the words are carefully chosen for the images and ideas they suggest, and in which the sounds of the words when read aloud often follow a particular rhythmic pattern. Collins Dictionary. An arrangement of words, written or spoken, traditionally a rhythmical composition, sometimes rhymed, expressing experiences, ideas, or emotions in a style more concentrated, imaginative, and powerful than ordinary speech or prose. Some are in meter, some are free verse. Since we're having this conversation in the digital world, I figured we could throw in dictionary.com, the art of rhythmical composition, written or spoken, for exciting pleasure by beautiful, imaginative, or elevated thoughts. And for fun, here's the definition from the Scrabble Dictionary. Poetry is a style of writing that uses a formula or organization and that is often divided up into lines or stanzas, or it refers to something beautiful. But we're not going to count this definition, just mentioning it for fun. Now, if we break it down even further, out of the 6 definitions given, 4 of them mention sound or spoken word. 3 out of the 6 mention experience. 4 out of the 6 mention imagination, or it having to be imaginative. 3 out of the 6 mention emotion and feelings. 6 out of the 6 mention rhythm, that they are written in a rhythmic format. So the only trait each dictionary feels is important to mention in its definition of poetry is rhythm. It is good to note here, before we move further along, a brief etymology of the word poetry. We'll get to the full etymology in another video. It's rooted in the ancient Greek word poiesis, which means to make, a verb, an action word. Thousands of years ago, it was a surname. Moving further along, it stems from the old French word poète, which I hope I'm saying right, and more directly from the Latin word poeta and poetria. I suggest you do more research on your own, as these variations of the word include the meanings to create, build, pile up, a deed, an order. A cool footnote here is the root word poiesis is sometimes used as a suffix in science. The deeper down the rabbit hole you go, you'll begin to see how cultures of all lands and eras took their own liberty in defining the word. So, in the tradition of those language aficionados before us, we're gonna do the same. That is right. The irony of it all is we're about to do what we said most people do at the beginning of this episode. We're going to give you an interpretation, but it will be one comprised of all the popular English dictionaries and the etymology of the word. And you're in luck. We have 2 definitions for you. 1. In the broader sense of the definition, poetry is the creation of imagination, experience, and life. Flowers blooming, a child's mind expanding, or a breathtaking rendition of your favorite ballet is all poetry. Remember, the root of the word is to make. In a more narrow sense of the definition, poetry is a written and oral tradition composed of rhythmical words describing an experience or something of one's imagination in a way deemed beautiful and more concentrated than ordinary speech. A little wordy, but I ask, how else do you describe the almighty describer? Moving forward in this series, this will be our definition of what poetry is. I hope this has helped some, and woohoo! You stuck around to the end and you survived my crude animation. Thanks!
I hope the presentation helps you. And this time, let's have a poetry intended for this lesson. So let me read to you a personal poetry I have written for this subject. So it talks about poetry and the different elements which are necessary in forming or crafting a good poem. This is entitled Poetic Delicacy, written in 2017. Here it goes. When tranquility conjured my atmosphere, and piercing emotions within me linger, remnants of concepts are forming, circulating inside the depths of my brain. All the while, such figments reached my heart. It wanted to travel, didn't want to stop. It wanted to go out, needed to be seen. But how? Why? With what means? Words came out, reaches the pen, tainted the paper with its visible tint. The pen mobilizes as it has its own will, while the paper freely catches what the pen might tell. Words talk as if they have life. They bond with each other and unite. They form visually legible images, heavy and deep as such of the ocean's trenches. Lines formed as perfect symmetrical horizons, intensifying each of clandestine founded tone. With rhythm so melodic could be heard from the moon, denuding all tantalizing perks of emotions. With a rhyme scheme so musically pure, massaged with rhyming words to further lure, spiced up with a little simile or metaphor. Now it sounds far from a lurking bore. Slice some imagery and sprinkle it on top, auditory, olfactory, or erotic ones or the like. It should be perceived by our senses to enliven them inches to inches. But a magnum opus isn't polished yet. It demands a little fire to be lit. A fire burning from the very depth, a depth where the emotions silently sleep. We should put a part of us to our delicacy, our emotions, our life, our fantasy. When arranged aesthetically on a plate, the dish becomes holistically poetic. Poetry served. Bon appetit. So this certain piece aims to explain the intricate process of writing a poetry, just like making a special dish, and presents the essential ingredients or elements that would make it more appealing and remarkable to the readers. The overall concept of a poem is an analogy between making a dish or preparing a dish and crafting a poetry. So as you can see, when we are cooking a dish, we need to have ingredients or important ingredients so that we can achieve the taste that we aspire. Same when you are writing a poetry, so you need to apply, employ, and use essential elements of the poetry so that you may produce or create a very good poetry. Okay? That's it. That's writing poetry, guys. I hope you have learned from this lesson, and I hope you will apply those learning in your future outputs. If you have questions or things you need to clarify, please message me directly. All activities will be given to you once you are done watching this video within the day I have sent this for you. Thank you so much, and God bless everyone.
Well, here's to the hearts that you're gonna break. Here's to the lives that you're gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we're gonna have. You don't need money, you got a free pass. Here's to the fact that I'll be sad without you. I want you to have it all.